Hey guys, welcome back here to the Fishing Teacher. Really appreciate you guys swinging by the channel to check today's video out. And guys, today I want to talk about how bass relate to points, as far as, you know, how they set up on them, how they use them under different conditions. Because if you guys watch all three of my channels, you hear me talking about points all the time. Probably the biggest reoccurring theme I talk about are main lake and secondary points. And you know why I do that is because points in any lake, I don't care if it's a grass lake, if it's a natural lake, if it's a, man-made lake, anything out there, points are the #1 bass structure for any lake. I mean, yeah, aquatic vegetation is probably the best habitat, but as far as a hard structure place, you can't beat points. And bass relate to points differently, different times of year, different conditions. And I sort of want to give you guys just sort of a general overview of it today to sort of get you started on it. And it doesn't matter what your skill levels is. I mean, if you're beginning, intermediate, advanced, there's going to be something in here for you. So I think you guys will really enjoy this episode here. Also, guys, before we get started, quick reminder, anybody interested in booking an on-the-water lesson with me, got our jerkbait lessons going on right now. Excuse me. Excellent time to learn how to fish a jerkbait. Just go to my homepage on my YouTube channel and hit the join button for information. Let's get you all set up there. And also, guys, thank you very much for everybody that throughout the course of 2025 has used and bookmarked my tackle warehouse link that I put in every video description. And if you guys like the Fishing Teacher and it's helping you catch some fish, the biggest thing you can do to help out, guys, is in 2026, anytime you need to order tackle, just use that tackle warehouse link of mine that's in the description, bookmark it, and the channel gets a small percentage of the commission on anything you purchase there. So that really helps it out. And thank you for me and my family, for everybody who's been doing that there. Okay. Excuse me. Bass love points, and they use points as staging areas. They live on points. They use them as like highways. They use them to feed on. They use them to just recuperate on. They even spawn on points. I mean, bass love points. Not all points are equal, and there's a lot of different variables to points here, and we could talk all day long about it. So I want to just sort of hit some of the highlights with this on what you really need to remember with points. Now, first of all, the ability of a point to produce consistently has a lot to do with how the point is positioned on the lake, whether it's in a creek arm or a main lake arm, and its proximity to deeper water. Your best points, it doesn't necessarily have to have deep water right next to it, but you need to have some deep water fairly close to it. Now, some points are steep and they drop real quick into deep water, and other points are more gradual or flat. And they lead out to deeper water. But I think that, in my own opinion, it's like if you're going to have a point that is like really good, day in and day out, consistently all year long, you need to have some deep water access in the form of a creek or river channel, usually within about 50 to 100 yards of the point. It just depends on that. That's going to make that point a lot better. Also with the point, you're going to find out that most of the better points have some type of a drop-off on some part of the point. Now, that point can be a drop-off in 5 to 10 foot of water, 15 to 20, 25 to 30, whatever. But most points that have just a straight gradual drop like that, they can be good and the bass can live on them, but the bass really like to have those points where you have like a slope to it and then a sharp drop off of it. That's another, that's another plus for the point. Not necessary, but it is a bonus that makes it even better with it. Also with the point, it has to do with the position that's located on the lake in terms of the wind direction hitting it. And, that's why not all points are equal. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about how bass live on points and how they relate to points. Now, this has a lot to do with several different factors. It has to do with the time of year. It has to do with the, water visibility that you have and the overall depth of the lake and the species of the bass that live on that particular lake. Here's what you're going to find out for the most part. It's very, very specific to water clarity. Say, for example, if you have water visibility that's dirty in the lake you fish, say the water visibility is only 1.5 feet or 2 foot at the most. If you have 1.5 to 2 foot of visibility on points, especially closer down to 1 foot of visibility, you're going to have fish living on the bottom, shallow on that point, most all year long. Those fish will not go out deeper on those points. And for the most part, they won't suspend off those points. They're just setting up on the bottom using whatever bottom cover that they're going to have. Now, as the water clarity increases with it, say for example, you go from, 1.5 foot visibility up to 3.5 foot of visibility, then the bass start behaving and positioning a little bit different. They will still use shallow water on those points, but at this point they start to go out a little bit deeper, and they will utilize deeper water depending upon how clear it goes, on down to 50 or 60 feet. But one of the things that happens when you start to get that water visibility in that 3 to 3.5 foot range is you start to have fish that begin to suspend on the points. And that's a different can of worms we'll get into here in a second. And then if you have real clear water, say water visibility over 4 or 5 or 6 foot clarity, then you have the potential for those bass to live really deep on the points. They can leave 50, 60, 70 foot on the bottom. And in the clear water, you're going to have more bass than not suspend in and around those points. They can be suspended in 5 foot of water, over 60. They can be 30 foot down. It just depends on the time of the year with it. So how those fish are set up on those points day in and day out depends on the water visibility. Another factor as far as how bass set up on points and the depths they use on it has to do with the thermocline development in the summertime. Usually like in July, August, sometimes into early September, there's going to be a thermocline that forms on most lakes across the country that makes the bass move shallower and suspend shallower, because once a thermocline forms like at 20 or 30 foot, there's not a lot of oxygen down deeper for those fish to get on. So those fish will tend to suspend shallower, or they move into shallower water for those 3 months of period. But say for example you're fishing a lake that's got 5 foot of clarity and you've got a real defined thermocline that sets up at 25 or 30 foot of water, those fish on that real clear water lake will suspend out all over that point, maybe 15 or 20 foot down or just right above the thermocline. But those same fish, like in December, when that thermocline has evaporated, those fish that are suspended may move down to 50, 60, even 70 foot deep. So they're going to relate to that. Another thing that goes with points to remember is points are very, very dependent upon different type of wind speeds as far as the techniques that you fish on them. For the most part, you want some type of wind on points unless you're fishing either really deep or some type of a topwater lure. But for most fishing, like if you're fishing a jerkbait or a swim bait or a crankbait or a chatterbait or anything like that around points, you're always going to have more activation with the wind on there. And how a bass bites a lure on a point has to do, again, with the slope of the point. It has to do with the water temperature and the water clarity and the species of bass that are in it. If you have a lake that has a mixed population of like largemouth, spotted bass, and smallmouth, those fish are all over the place. Smallmouth and spotted bass in particular like to suspend more. The largemouth usually tend to be more on the bottom, so that depends on it. So say for example, if you have a lake that's predominantly largemouth, and one good technique would be like dragging a football head jig in 20 or 25 foot of water for largemouth. But if you have a lake that has a good mix of bass, say it's half largemouth, half spotted bass, a lot of times you'll have all those spotted bass, they'll be schooled up, suspended out off of those points, and you have to catch them like on a swim bait or drop shot or something like that. So every situation is unique to itself in terms of how that's laid out. It depends on, again, the species, the water clarity, the water temperature, time of the year, current's another factor. One thing that you'll notice about fishing points more than anything else is the activity level of bass on points are highly dependent upon current levels or current draw. And it doesn't take much. I mean, if they don't have any current coming through the lake, like all the generators are shut off, it usually makes point fishing pretty tough. But if they're drawing some water or trying to pull water through the lake a little bit or drop the lake down, that really activates those fish on point. So pay attention to those generation schedules. They can really help you out with that. And some of my favorite point lures, guys, let me just run through them real quick here. I love fishing a topwater lure on points under the right situation. Clear water, warm water, Like a walking topwater is one of my favorite baits for fishing points. Other times of the year, it just depends on the water visibility and water temperature. Jerk baits and crankbaits are some of my favorites. Points are good with like a shaky head, a Ned rig, a football head jig, something like that. Deep diving crankbait in the summertime can be good. There's just a lot of different, baits that work on them, just depending on your situation. Because you can be fishing like a point, say for example in Grand Lake in Oklahoma, like a rocky 45-degree angle point, with water visibility about 2 foot, and there's going to be bass on it. And then you could fish down at like Lake Toho or Lake Kissimmee in Florida, where there's a grass point running out, and the grass point acts as the same thing as just a man-made lake rocky point. Those fish will relate to those points quite often, even in a grass lake. So that's just some overviews, guys. We could go talk all day long about that, but that at least will maybe get you started a little bit, and hope it helps everybody out. We'll talk later.